Good afternoon, everyone. Audible? Students, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am,
ma'am,
you're
you're
audible.
audible, ma'am.
Okay, my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Shall I start or shall I wait? Half of you are joined. Okay, let's wait for 2 minutes, then I'll start. Till the time, can anyone tell me what do you understand by coagulation disorders? What is normal hemostasis? Anyone can tell anything? Whatever you know from the
Ma'am,
previous lecture.
coagulation disorders.
Hmm.
Ma'am, these are the disorders which are mainly associated with the coagulation cascade, like the whole process right from the beginning of bleeding till the coagulation is completed. So, at any point of time or at any stage of coagulation cascade, if there's deficiency or an improper availability of any one raw material, which could be like clotting factors or platelets or fibrin or thrombin. So
Yes.
any qualitative or quantitative defect in the coagulation cascade can be covered by coagulation disorders.
Yeah. Uh, any idea about normal hemostasis? Can anyone tell me? That is the basic because
Ma'am, there are three steps in that. Firstly, there's vasoconstriction.
yes.
Then there could be platelet adhesion, aggregation, platelet active adhesion, aggregation, activation.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
after that, there's production of a temporary hemostatic plug, which is followed by deposition of fibrin, which leads to a permanent hemostatic plug.
Yes.
And then clot retraction.
And then
Clot retraction, but that doesn't come under hemostasis, I think.
okay, let me see how many you joined. 90. Okay, let's start. So I think you are Bhavya, Bhavna.
Yes, ma'am. Bhavya.
Okay, Bhavya. Bhavya, I've told basics of hemostasis and coagulation. So I'll just quickly cover these. So as she rightly said, hemostasis involves all the factors. It can be platelets, clotting factors, endothelium, any vascular injury. With the help of all these factors, will lead to formation of blood clot to limit the bleeding. So the first step in the hemostasis is vasoconstriction. It will limit the blood flow to the site of the injury, usually by the neurogenic or humoral reflexes, and also by the certain factors released from the endothelium because there is injury to the endothelium. So endothelium causes vasoconstriction at the site of injury. Then is the formation of the primary hemostatic plug, that is called primary hemostasis, in which the site of injury there is exposure of the collagen and also certain factors at the site of injury which will cause adhesion of the platelets to the site, and there is conformational change in the platelets. There will be change in the shape, and the platelets will release granules from these granules from the platelets also will cause further recruitment of the more platelets, and there will be formation of there will be aggregation of platelets, which will be, we call it as a primary hemostatic plug, which is formed by the platelets. By the time, because there is injury to the endothelium also, there is release of tissue factor from the subendothelial surface, which is mostly stored in the uh, smooth muscle cells, endothelium and all. So there will be release of tissue factor. One side, these platelets are aggregating and limiting the um, blood flow, extent of bleeding, and other, this tissue factor will cause activation of the coagulation pathway. So there will be phospholipid expression, there will be activation of the coagulation pathway, and ultimately this will lead to a formation of fibrin plug. So this is a secondary hemostasis. Secondary hemostatic plug is formed. Primary is formed by the platelets. Secondary is formed with the help of platelets and also the coagulation factors. And ultimately there is resorption of the platelet, the clot, and there will be limitation of the clot formation. Otherwise, it will block all the vessels. So once that bleeding has stopped, the other factors which will inhibit this coagulation will be released, and there will be limitation of this coagulation pathway. So this is the basics of the coagulation cascade. This is what we are doing in the laboratory. This is in vitro, and this what happens in the body. So in vitro is because we are testing the any deficiency or any abnormality in the factors which are involved in coagulation. This is in vivo, what is happening in the body. What I told you is that there is release of tissue factor because of the injury to the endothelium. So this tissue factor will lead to the activation of the factor 8. This factor 8 and this tissue factor will act as a cofactor. So in combination, this complex will activate the factor 9, and this factor 9A with the along with this activated factor 8, it will cause activation of the factor 10, and factor 10 along with activated factor 5 will lead to the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin, which will cause fibrinogen to fibrin clot. So this is how tissue factor is causing the formation of fibrin factor. Along with this, another pathway is also going on. This thrombin is acting like this thrombin will further activate the pathway, this coagulation pathway. And other these factors are also involved in this uh, clot formation. This is what is happening in the in vitro, but in vivo, sorry. And what is happening in vitro is what we call as intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway. So in the intrinsic pathway, what factors are involved is the factor 12. First is the activation of the factor 12, which is for which we that we, this is the process we are doing in the laboratory. So we don't have the platelets and everything. So we'll add these factors to the tubes and all to initiate the clotting process. So we'll add the glass beads which have the negatively charged surface. They will activate the factor 12. Along with this, we'll add the calcium and other cofactors which are helpful in the clotting process, and also the platelets which will provide the phospholipid surface for the tissue factor. So both the factors, both these pathways, they will ultimately lead to the activation of factor 10 with the help of factor 5, and conversion of prothrombin to thrombin and fibrinogen to fibrin clot. So this is what we are assessing in the laboratory, and this is what happening in the body. So now with this background, we will start with the coagulopathies. Coagulopathies are because of the deficiency in the coagulation factors, or there is some abnormality in the coagulation factors. So this is the today we are just going to the defects because of the coagulation factors. In the next lectures we'll cover the abnormalities in the platelets and other factors which will lead to coagulopathies. So any of the factor from 12 to 5, any factor can be involved in the there can be deficiency or abnormality in any coagulation factors, which can be quantitative. That means there is the deficiency of this factor, or qualitative, there is some abnormality in the function of those clotting factors. And these disorders can be hereditary or acquired. But what is seen is the hereditary deficiencies. They usually affect a single clotting factor. There will be defect in a single clotting factor. Like most common is the factor 8 deficiency, which we call it as a hemophilia A. Deficiency in factor 9 is called hemophilia B, or volvulin factor deficiency. So these are the most common hereditary deficiencies leading to coagulopathy. The acquired deficiencies, they usually involve the multiple coagulation factors, and this occurs because there is some there is decreased protein synthesis, or there is shortened protein half-life. So these clotting factors, there will be multiple clotting factors can be affected. Like in the vitamin K deficiency, there are multiple factors which are vitamin K dependent. Can anyone tell me what are vitamin K dependent clotting factors?
Ma'am,
2,
2,
7, 9, 10,
7,
and
9,
protein
10.
C, protein S.
7, 9, 10.
Hmm. Yeah. So if there is deficiency in vitamin K, all these factors will be affected. Or if there is any liver disease, a parenchymal liver disease, there is certain the protein synthesis and other synthesis of the clotting factors which is going on in the liver. So multiple factors will be involved. In DIC is disseminated intravascular clotting. So in DIC, what is happening is the multiple, because uh, ongoing continuous clotting is going on, blood clots are forming. So there is multiple factors are used up, and there is deficiency of the multiple factors. So these are some acquired causes, and these are the hereditary causes which are most common. So clinical manifestations are important because we have to differentiate clinically if the patient is presenting with a platelet defect or with the clotting factor defect. So in this, because of the deficiency of these clotting factors, the patients usually have post-traumatic ecchymosis or hematomas. There will be large hematomas. There will be prolonged bleeding from a laceration or from after a surgical procedure. And this bleeding usually occurs in GI tract, urinary tract, and the most common is the hemarthrosis. What is happening is there even the minor stress or trauma to the weight bearing joint can lead to excessive bleeding in this joint, and will lead to hemarthrosis. The most commonly affected is the knee joint. So the clotting factors will lead to large hematomas or hemarthrosis. First, we'll read about hemophilia. In the next lecture, I'll tell you the difference between how you clinically differentiate from plate clotting factor and the platelet deficiency. How clinically the patients will present differently. So today we'll read about this. What is hemophilia? It is the most common hereditary disease which is associated with a life-threatening bleeding. It is X-linked recessive disorder, so mainly affects the male or can affect the homozygous females. Rarely, other females are also affected if there is lionization of the X chromosome, but most commonly they affect the males. And in this, there is deficiency of the factor 8. Factor 8 can be deficient, or there can be mutations in the factor synthesis of the factor 8. If the patient, sometimes like about 30% of the patients will have no family history. So in those cases, these are the diseases which are caused because of the occurrence of new mutations in the factor 8 gene. So patient may or may not have a significant family history, but in 70% cases there will be history of this disorder in the family, and these are X-linked recessive disorders. Clinically, the severity will depend upon the deficiency, how much is the deficiency of this factor 8. Like if the factor 8 is less than 1% of the normal levels, there will be severe, that is called a severe disease. If 2 to 5% of the normal levels are present, these are called a moderately severe disease. And if the patient will have a 60 to 50% of the normal factor 8 activity, that is a mild disease. And the most severe deficiencies, those occur because of the inversion of the X chromosome, which will cause the which will completely abolish the synthesis of the factor VIII, or there can be point mutations in the factor VIII which will impair the function of this protein. So X chromosome is mainly involved, and it is X-linked recessive disorder also. Clinically, what I have told you is similar for the hemophilia. The patient can have massive hemorrhage or continuous bleeding after trauma or operative procedures. There can be spontaneous hemorrhages in the region of body that are susceptible to trauma, like joints. Minor injury to the joints can lead to excessive bleeding and hemarthrosis. And this hemarthrosis, there will be recurrent bleeding. Recurrent bleeding within the joints will lead to progressive deformities and can be crippling. And petechiae are usually absent because petechiae are characteristically present in the platelet disorders. So now the patient is presenting with this bleeding and all. So how will you diagnose? The major, uh, you will see that normal. You will do the platelet count, platelet function. Those will be normal in these patients. And if you will do the coagulation defects to identify the defects in the coagulation, we'll see that there will be a normality in the intrinsic pathway because factor VIII is the uh, uh, intrinsic pathway, so there will be prolonged partial thromboplastin time, but prothrombin time will be normal. Prothrombin time will assess the extrinsic pathway, and this will assess the intrinsic pathway. And if we are getting the prolonged PTT, then we can do the specific factor VIII assays also, which will identify the percentage or the activity of the factor VIII, on the basis of which we decide the, like I told you, this clinical severity is based on the factor VIII levels. So specific assays can be done in the to detect the factor VIII in the blood. And what is the treatment of hemophilia A? Because the patient there is deficiency of factor VIII, so replacement therapy with the combinant factor VIII can be given, or factor VIII concentrates are given to these patients. Next is what is called a hemophilia B, also called as Christmas disease, and this is because of the factor IX deficiency. And why it is called Christmas disease? It is not because of the holiday or something. It is based on the this disease was first on the first patient which was identified with this condition. The hemophilia B is named after that. So similar to factor VIII, there will be mutations in the gene which will encode the factor IX, and this is also X-linked recessive disorder. Will have a clinical severity based on the percentage of factor IX activity in the blood. In this also PTT is prolonged and PT is normal. So in both the conditions, PTT is prolonged, but prothrombin time is normal. So in this also we can do the specific assays for detection of factor IX, and it is also treated with the infusion of the recombinant factor IX. So this is similar to hemophilia A, but hemophilia A is much more common than the B. Next, we'll see that factor VIII is associated with the wall-Willebrand factor, and this will form a complex in the blood. So factor VIII we have seen it will factor VIII along with factor IX will convert factor 10 to activated factor 10A, which along with factor 5A will form the prothrombin to thrombin. And this factor VIII is made synthesized in the endothelial cells and also in the liver also. And the other factor, which is Wolfram factor, it is synthesized in the endothelial cells and it is synthesized in the megakaryocytes. So this is present in the alpha granules of the platelets. So once the factor 8 is secreted in the blood, it will bind to the wall bilirubin factor, and this complex will circulate in the bloodstream. And why it is important? Because this stabilizes the factor 8 and it will increase the half-life of the factor 8. So any deficiency in wall bilirubin factor also will reduce the activity or the uh, like there will be deficiency of factor 8 because of the decreased half-life of this factor. So this is what is factor 8. And now what is wall bilirubin factor? It is also secreted by the endothelial cells, but in the bloodstream it exists as the multimers. And these are the wall bilirubin factor. They usually appear in the plasma as the multimers. So this wall bilirubin factor and factor 8 is binding. So this is a complex which is circulating. Some wall bilirubin factor is also present in the subendothelial surface, and any injury to the vessel wall will expose this subendothelial wall bilirubin factor, and also the collagen. So both these will uh, cause the adhesion of the platelets through GP1B receptors. So with the help of these receptors, the platelet will adhere to the wall bilirubin factor, and platelet to platelet aggregation will occur because of the binding at the GP2B3A protein with the help of fibrinogen. This receptor with the help of fibrinogen will lead to platelet aggregation. So wall bilirubin factor will promote the adhesion of the platelet to the subendothelial matrix through bridging of the glycoprotein 1B9 with the help of wall bilirubin factors and collagen also. And it will also promote the platelet aggregation by activating this glycoprotein 2B3A integrins. This usually occurs in a small vessel. So any deficiency in this factor will lead to wall bilirubin disease. This is the most commonly inherited coagulopathy, which affects 1 to 2% of the population. And in this also there will be spontaneous bleeding from the mucous membrane, or can have excessive bleeding from wounds, or female patients can present with menorrhagia also. So presenting symptom is excessive hemorrhage after any trauma or surgery. Like the hemophilia, we had the variable clinical severity. This also can be clinically heterogeneous or molecularly also. Like there are multiple types of wall bilirubin disease, but 3 types are more common. In type 1 and type 3, there will be quantitative defects. There will be decrease in the amount of this wall bilirubin factor. So type 1 and 2, 3 both are autosomal, and type 1 is autosomal dominant. It is most common type of disease, and there will be clinically the disease is mild, and there will be mild to moderate deficiency. While in type 3 there will be no wall bilirubin factor synthesis. So it is totally absent, but it is least common type. Both can be due to the mutations like point substitutions that will interfere with the maturation of the wall bilirubin factor protein, or can be rapid clearance from the plasma. So both will lead to decrease in the amount of the wall bilirubin factor or activity. While in type 3 there is no synthesis because of the deletions of frame shift mutations involving both the alleles. And because wall bilirubin factor is stabilizing the factor 8, so ultimately there will be deficiency or decrease of the factor 8 also. So bleeding uh, can be severe and can present like a hemophilia also. Clinically, both patients will have similar symptoms. And what is the difference from the type 2 from type 1 and 3 is there is the qualitative defect. The amount of the factor is normal, but there is, like I'll tell you, this is also autosomal dominance and accounts for 20% of the cases. There will be missense mutations that will lead to defective multimer formation. I told you the Wolff-Riemann factor, it circulates in the blood in the form of multimers. So larger intermediate size multimers, which are active forms of Wolff-Riemann factor, will be missing from the plasma. And there will be this type 2 is associated with mild to moderate bleeding, and there are two types of type 2 are also further divided into type 2A and B. In 2A, these multimers are absent from the platelets in plasma, and in type 2B, there is synthesis of abnormal factor, which will have increased affinity for platelets, and in some cases it has been seen that it is associated with thrombocytopenia also. So how will you diagnose these cases? There is a specific test called the ristostatin agglutination test to assess the function of the Wolff-Riemann factor. So what we do is, because this factor works with the help of platelets, so in the normal formalin fixed platelets are used, and patient plasma is added to these platelets in the presence of ristostatin. Ristostatin will activate and cause the release of Wolff-Riemann factor from the uh, will cause the release of this Wolff-Riemann factor. So depending upon the amount of this factor in the patient plasma, the results will come. So the ristostatin will induce the multiple formation and will bind to the platelet glycoprotein 1b9 and will lead to formation of interplatelet bridges. So there will be agglutination, clumping, or formation of platelet plugs. So by assessing the formation of this agglutination, the graph is plotted, and based on the agglutination and the dilution of the patient plasma used, we can assess the activity of this factor in the blood sample. And because the deficiency in this factor will lead to decrease in the factor 8 stability also. So there can be prolonged PPT also in type 1 and type 3. The treatment of this also is, we can substitute or replace with the help of this factor 8 and also Wolff-Riemann factor, the recombinant factors. We can infuse the plasma with these concentrates. And there is also one drug called desmopressin, which will cause the release of this preformed Wolff-Riemann factor from the endothelial storage pools. So this is also helpful in this disease, mostly in the type 1 cases and in some forms of type 2. So most common treatment of these coagulopathies is replacement therapy only, because they are lacking the uh, factors in the bloodstream. So these were the main diseases. Any questions?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Can you please tell about the significance of prothrombin time for the again, please?
Significance.
Prothrombin time.
Tell. In the prothrombin time, we are assessing the extensive pathway. So for the tissue, because tissue factor is the first factor which is activating this pathway. So in the patient plasma, we'll add the platelets. Platelet will provide the phospholipid surfaces. So in this, if the patient is having, we'll also provide the different vitamin K and calcium and other factors which acts as a cofactor in this pathway. So tissue factor is provided with the help of platelets. Then we'll add the uh, normal plasma to the patient plasma to the sample, to the tubes, and if the patient sample will have a normal level of these factors, so activation of this tissue factor will lead to activation of the other clotting pathway, and there will be formation of the fibrin plug in the tube. So we assess the formation of fibrin plug. If these factors will be absent on the even on the prolonged stay, no clot will be formed in the tube. So we assess this extrinsic pathway and deficiency of these factors. Like if we'll say that prothrombin time is increased, so we cannot tell what factor is deficient or defective in that pathway, because prothrombin time can be increased in deficiencies of any factor, any deficiency of factor 7 or factor 10, prothrombin, factor 5. So deficiencies in all these will lead to increase in the prothrombin time, while deficiencies in all these factors will lead to increase in partial thromboplastin time, in which we assess the intrinsic pathway. This is similar to this, but because this starts with the factor 12, so for the activation of factor 12, we'll add the glass beads. They provide the negatively charged surface and cause the activation of factor 12. And once this pathway is activated, there will be formation of clot in the test tube. So we assess this pathway, and any deficiency. If the patient will have deficiency of prothrombin or factor 10 or factor 5, so both these pathways will be affected, and there will be increase in both PTT and PT. Prothrombin time, partial thromboplastin. If both times are increased, then we'll say that this common pathway is affected. Understood?
Okay, ma'am.
I think this will be will be covered in your practical classes also. Anyone else want to ask anything?
Why not PTT is prolonged in type 2 von Willebrand factor disease?
Because in type 2, PT is not prolonged. Because factor
No
8,
PTT.
sorry, PTT. Because these wall-building factors, these multimers are not formed, but there are still this factor is circulating. So factor 8 is still bound to these wall-building factors. But this is not the active form. These multimers are actually the active forms of this factor. Getting my point?
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, why in the retrocytin test platelets are formalin fixed?
Formalin fixed or wash platelets we use because those cannot directly start that. Otherwise, if you'll add more of the platelets, they will bind itself and will agglutinate. Na? So these formalin fixed or wash platelets which we use, these platelets are they cannot directly form the agglutinate. So to inhibit the agglutination, we use the wash platelets or formalin fixed platelets.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
They cannot directly activate the agglutination because we want this activation through the this factor through the patient plasma. Okay. Anything else?
No, ma'am.